My name is Cecily Drummond. I am 67 years old, and I live in Perth, Ontario. The green tin cash box sat in the bottom of my husband's workshop wardrobe for 11 years, underneath a stack of paint-splattered catalogs and a broken heat gun he always meant to repair. He pointed at it once, in September of 2015, without making it a ceremony. He just came in from the workshop and said, while he was washing his hands at the kitchen sink, "Sec, that green cash box in the wardrobe, don't go into it while I'm still breathing. When the time comes, you'll know what to do with it." I told him not to talk that way. He said he was not being morbid, he was being practical. Then he dried his hands on the tea towel and asked what was for supper. That was Leonard. He died on a Wednesday morning in April. We had been married for 43 years. 3 weeks after the funeral, 8 of us sat in the boardroom of a law office on Harriet Street for the reading of his will. My daughter arrived with a notepad. She is 45 years old, and she works in property management, and she had married a real estate lawyer, so she had come to that room knowing more about what was in those documents than anyone else present. When the solicitor reached the part about the estate's outstanding obligations, I give to my wife, Cecily, all promissory notes and other obligations owing to me at my death. My daughter looked up from her notepad, looked at her husband, and said it quietly enough that only the 8 of us heard. "So Mum gets the IOUs. Nothing real." Her husband pressed his lips together. He did not disagree. My younger son Thomas, who had flown in from Vancouver the day before, looked at me across the table. I looked back at him and said nothing. I had been saying nothing in rooms for 43 years. That is not the same thing as having nothing to say. I should tell you what I did for a living, because it matters later. I worked for 34 years in the Records and Assessment Division at Lanark County. I started in 1983, when I was 25, filing property assessment rolls and processing tax certificates. By 1992, I was managing the document verification unit. My job was to receive documents, log them, cross-check every legal description, and make absolutely certain that every transfer, every easement, every registered instrument ended up exactly where it was supposed to be in the public record. I trained 7 people over the years. The first thing I told every one of them was this: a document only exists officially when it is registered. A piece of paper someone holds in their hands proves they have a piece of paper. The registry proves it is real. I retired in 2017. In 34 years in that office, I never once looked up my own name. Leonard ran Drummond Hardware on Gore Street. He had bought the building in 1991. 2 stories of cut limestone, the kind Perth is full of, for $148,000, which at the time took everything we had plus a loan from the credit union. The ground floor was the store. Upstairs, he rented to a dental practice that had been there since 1998, a husband and wife team who paid $2,400 a month and never once gave him trouble. The building was paid off by 2013. Leonard was proud of that the way some men are proud of raising a child. He paid it off, and then he took me to the Perth Manor for dinner and ordered the rack of lamb, which he had never done in 40 years of knowing each other. In 2019, he sold the hardware business to our daughter and her husband. Not the building, just the business. The inventory, the equipment, the name, the goodwill. $340,000. He said he could have given it to them, but he was not going to. He said he had watched his own brother given a fishing lodge in Calabogie outright, free and clear, by an uncle who loved him. And his brother had run it into the ground in 4 years and spent the next decade explaining why. He said a person only takes care of what they bought. He drew up a vendor take-back mortgage at 4.5%, 20 years, monthly payments of $2,141. Our daughter signed it in September of 2019 at a solicitor's table in Smiths Falls. Then she drove back to Perth and told people at the Legion Hall that she had taken over her father's business. Leonard died on April 9th. Pancreatic cancer found the previous November. He handled it the way he handled a bad winter. Quietly, without complaint, by getting on with things. He kept going to the store until February. He spent his last weeks in the back bedroom with the window that looks over the Tay River. The will was filed with the county court. Our daughter was named estate trustee. She took to it the way she takes to most things, immediately and completely. She had the store's mail redirected within the week. She had the back entrance code changed. She called me on a Thursday to say, "Mom, don't worry about any of the paperwork side. Stuart and I have it covered." I said that was very helpful. She said, "You've never had to deal with any of this before, have you?" It was not really a question. She was right that I had never done a closing. She was wrong about everything else, and she had no idea, and neither did I. Not yet. The night after the will reading, I did not go to the workshop wardrobe right away. I stood in the kitchen and went through the pantry and found a tin of lentil soup past its date. I set it on the counter. I thought about what my daughter had said that afternoon. Nothing real. I thought about the notepad she had brought. I thought about the fact that Leonard had told me, very specifically, 11 years earlier, not to open that box while he was still gone. He had not said, "Do not open it." He had said, "Not while I'm here." There is a difference. I went into the workshop at 9:20 at night. The cash box was exactly where he had always kept it. Olive green metal with a black handle, roughly the size of a boot box, a small brass padlock on the hasp, the kind that takes a tiny key. I did not have the key. Then I remembered that when the hospital sent his things home in a clear plastic bag, there had been a key ring, his wallet, his reading glasses case, and a key ring with 4 keys. 3 I had identified. I had put the ring in the kitchen junk drawer and not thought of it since. The 4th key, small and brass, fit the padlock perfectly. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the kitchen table and set it under the overhead light. There were 6 things inside. I am going to tell you what they were in order, because order matters and because that is how I was trained to do this. First, a promissory note, dated September 12, 2019, $340,000, 4.5% fixed, 240 monthly payments of $2,141, signed at the bottom by our daughter and her husband as joint borrowers, and by Leonard as lender. I have known my daughter's signature since she was 15. She worked out the loop on the D at our kitchen table on the back of a homework sheet. Second, attached to the back of the note by a paperclip, a single typed sheet, 4 lines of text. This note is hereby assigned and transferred to Cecily Drummond, signed by Leonard, dated March 14, 2021, notarized. Third, a document titled Assignment of Rent, 3 pages. It assigned Leonard's right to collect rent from the dental practice on the 2nd story of 47 Gore Street directly to me, by name, in full. Also dated March 14, 2021. Also notarized. In the top right corner of the first page, stamped in purple ink, slightly crooked, Lanark County Land Registry Office. Instrument No. LT 412208. Received March 2021, 9:22 a.m. That stamp. I had pressed that exact stamp onto documents 10,000 times over 34 years. I set it face down on the table and took a breath. Fourth, a payment ledger. Spiral bound, the kind you can buy at any office supply store. 3 columns in Leonard's handwriting, date, amount received, running balance. The first entry was October 2019. Then November, December every month through 2020, 2021, 2022. You could watch the handwriting age across those pages. Early entries clean and back slanted, the way he had learned to write in the Navy. Then 2023 started changing. January and February have margin notes. Late, 11 days. Late, 19 days. March says late, cash, 31 days. April and May are blank. 1 more entry in June, 1 in August, then nothing until November. And from January 2024 forward, every single line reads the same 2 words. No PMT. He had numbered them. No PMT 2, all the way to no PMT 18 dated March of 2025. The last entry, April 2nd, 2 weeks before he was admitted to hospital, was in handwriting I barely recognized. Shaky, the letters leaning sideways. No PMT 19. He numbered it. He wanted someone to be able to count without having to count. I put the ledger down and I slid off my chair and sat on the kitchen floor. The linoleum is cold in April. I sat there a long time. When I got back up, I did the only thing I know how to do, with a pile of documents I do not yet understand. I inventoried them. Same as any records office. You do not guess. You lay it out, you count it, you write down what you have. Fifth item, a receipt from the Land Registry Office, $22.50, dated March 15, 2021. Sixth item, an envelope. My name on the front in Leonard's printing. I set it aside and read the remaining documents first, because I have always been that way about the thing I'm most afraid of. I read the assignment of rent twice with a ruler under each line, $2,400 a month. The dental practice, instrument LT 412208, registered in the Lanark County Land Registry through the provincial Teranet system, a system I had used every working day for the last 15 years of my career. The last clause of the assignment said, upon the occurrence of a default under the promissory note, the assignee may notify the tenant directly and collect rents for her own account. I went and put the kettle on. My hands were shaking enough that I used both of them. While I stood waiting for the water, I said out loud to the kitchen what my daughter had said that afternoon in that boardroom. So Mum gets the IOUs. Nothing real. She had the direction of the debt exactly right. She just had the arrow pointing at the wrong person. I sat back down and opened the envelope. One sheet of yellow legal paper, both sides in blue ballpoint, dated March 14, 2021. He wrote, Sec, I couldn't tell you this while I was here. You know why. You would have called her that same day, and she would have sent one payment to calm things down, and one payment accepted starts the whole clock over. 30 days all over again. I would rather be right and in the ground than right and watching you smooth it over. He wrote, I watched the payments stop. I got up every month and I wrote it down, and then I came for supper and I asked you how your day was, because what else would I do? The grocery store doesn't care whether she pays me. You do. He wrote, one more thing. This is all in the public record at the Land Registry. It has been sitting there since March of 2021. You know exactly where to look. I always figured that if you ever needed it, you would know what to do with it. I was right about that. I have always been right about that. The last line, underlined once with a ruler. You have been reading other people's documents your whole career. Now you have one with your own name on it. Go read it. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Then I sat in the kitchen until 4 a.m. doing arithmetic. 18 missed payments at $2,141. That was more than $38,000 in arrears. Plus the 28 months of dental office rent my daughter had been collecting into the estate account. $2,400 a month. That by every right of that registered instrument belonged to me. The next morning I got up, put on my good cardigan, and drove 14 minutes to the Lanark County building on Craig Street. The Provincial Land Registry operates through the Teranet system now. There are public terminals. I had not been in that building since I retired, but the woman at the front desk knew me. And when I sat down at the terminal, the interface was the same one I had trained on. I typed in the address. 47 Gore Street, Perth, Ontario. I pulled the instrument history. There it was. Instrument LT 386044, vendor take-back mortgage. September 12, 2019. Mortgager, the numbered company mortgage, Leonard James Drummond. Instrument LT 412208. Assignment of mortgage and assignment of rent. March 15, 2021. Assigner, Leonard James Drummond. Assignee, Cecily Ann Drummond. All of it in the public record. Anyone with $11 and a library computer could have found it in 20 minutes. My daughter's company had been operating out of that building for 6 years. Her husband's was a real estate lawyer. At no point had anyone run a title search on the property. I sat with that for a moment. Then I printed the summaries and drove home. I called Thomas from the kitchen. He lives in Vancouver and works for a marine engineering firm. He is not a lawyer, but he is methodical and he does not panic, which in a crisis is often more useful than a law degree. I read him the instrument numbers. He was quiet. Then he said, Mom, that assignment is registered. I said, yes. He said, that means it's real. I said, I know. He said the thing that mattered, get yourself a lawyer, today if you can. I called a property and estates solicitor in Smiths Falls that afternoon. She had been in practice for 27 years. Her name was Fiona MacPhail, and she charged $325 an hour and told me that at the start of the conversation, before I had said a word about why I was there, which I appreciated. I drove in on Thursday. I set the green cash box on her desk without saying anything. She read for 25 minutes. When she reached the payment ledger, she stopped and pushed her glasses up onto her forehead. Then she said, "Mrs. Drummond, I want you to understand the theory your daughter is currently operating on." She explained it carefully. If the note had been an asset of the estate and she inherited the estate, the debt would collapse. You cannot owe money to yourself. Lawyers call that merger. It is a real legal principle. But, she said, tapping the assignment, merger requires the note to have been in his estate on April 9th. It left his estate in March of 2021. There is nothing here to merge. Your daughter does not owe the estate. She owes you. She has owed you for 4 years. Then she asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted what I was owed, and nothing beyond that. She wrote it down on her notepad and said that was a good answer. She drew it out in 2 columns. On the left, the note, the mortgage, the rent assignment. Entirely mine, entirely outside the estate. She would send a notice of default by registered mail, Canada Post, return receipt. 30 days to cure, then power of sale proceedings if necessary. Ontario does not use foreclosure. It uses power of sale, which is faster and gives the lender more options. On the right, the estate. The probate, the surviving spouse's preferential share under the Succession Law Reform Act. The first $350,000 of the net estate comes to me before any distribution, and a full accounting of what the estate trustee had collected. 28 months of dental rent at $2,400 a month. $67,200 that had gone into an account my daughter controlled. That money was mine by the registered assignment. It had not come to me. At the door, she asked if Leonard had told me why he made me wait. I said there was a letter and I had read it. She looked at me for a moment and let it go. Then she said, "The notice goes out Tuesday unless you say otherwise." I said Tuesday was fine. The registered letter went by Canada Post on a Tuesday morning, 2 pages. I had read it 6 times before I let her send it. 18 missed payments, April 2024 through October 2025. Total arrears, $38,538. Late payment interest, $2,312. Cure deadline, 30 days from receipt. The letter was signed for on Thursday afternoon. My daughter called that Saturday. She did not leave a message. She called twice more on Sunday. On Sunday evening, she sent a text message. "We've spoken to a solicitor. What you're doing is financial elder abuse, and we will pursue it accordingly." I read that twice. Financial elder abuse. I was 67 years old with 34 years in a public records office, and I had become the predator in my own kitchen. I want to be precise about what my daughter and her husband did in the 30 days that followed. They did not ask what date those instruments were registered. Her husband, a real estate lawyer, did not run a title search on a building he had been working out of for 6 years. The information that would have changed everything was sitting in a provincial database accessible to any member of the public for $11. Nobody went looking. On the 31st day, Fiona sent a notice to the dental practice. It included a certified copy of Instrument LT 412208. It said that, effective immediately, all rent payments for the second floor at 47 Gore Street were to be made payable to Cecily Drummond directly. The dentist, who had rented that office for 27 years, called me herself. She said she had paid Leonard for over 2 decades without a problem, and she was not about to start questioning things now. Her check came the following Monday. $2,400, made out to me. My daughter found out the same afternoon. She called within the hour. She used the word vindictive 3 times. She said I was being led by a lawyer who didn't know our family. She said her father would not have wanted this. I stood in my front hallway and said one sentence. "Pull up the instrument numbers, sweetheart. Both of them." Then I ended the call and stood in the hallway until I heard the car leave. That night I finally understood the fussy thing he had added, almost as an afterthought, all those years ago at the kitchen sink. "When the time comes, you'll know what to do," He had not said if the time comes. He was not uncertain. He had built the whole thing and left the room, and he had trusted me to do the rest. That was not something he said out loud. That was something he put in writing and registered at the land registry office and left under a stack of paint catalogs for 11 years. The estate matter went before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, Estates Division, in Smiths Falls. The hearing was on a Thursday in late November. Thomas flew in from Vancouver the night before. We ate scrambled eggs at my kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night because neither of us could face anything more complicated. I wore the blue cardigan. The courtroom had high ceilings and tall windows and a smell of old wood and floor wax. There were other matters on the docket that morning. I counted the room the way I count things when I need to keep my hands still. My daughter sat at the far table with her solicitor and her husband behind her. Thomas sat beside me. Her solicitor was courteous throughout. He made the merger argument clearly, and in good faith. The note had been Leonard's asset. It passed to the estate at death, since the primary beneficiary was the estate trustee. The debt collapsed into her inheritance. He noted that I had never been involved in the store's finances. He noted that the dispute was a family matter that had been brought into the wrong room. The judge looked at him over her glasses and asked one question. Was the instrument registered prior to the date of death? Her solicitor said, "We proceeded on information provided by our client, Your Honor." Fiona stood up with 4 printed pages. She said, "Instrument LT 386044. Vendor Take-Back Mortgage, September 12, 2019. Mortgagor, the numbered company. Mortgage, Leonard James Drummond." She said, "Instrument LT 412208. Assignment of mortgage and assignment of rent, March 15, 2021. Assigner, Leonard James Drummond. Assignee, Cecily Ann Drummond, received at 9:22 in the morning. She held up the certified copy with the purple registry stamp. Then she set it down. She said, "This instrument left the deceased's estate 3 years and 25 days before he died. There is no merger. The debt is not owed to the estate. It is owed to my client. It has been owed to my client since March of 2021, and it has been sitting in an open public record on the Teranet system for that entire time, accessible to anyone with a computer and $11. Then she opened the payment ledger and read the last 4 lines aloud. No PMT 16, no PMT 17, no PMT 18, no PMT 19, flat like reading a column of figures, which is exactly what it was. My daughter came out of her chair. "That's my father's personal records," she said. "He was ill. He was a sick man keeping notes with a shaking hand." Her solicitor had a hand on her sleeve. The judge said her name once. She sat down. I did not turn around. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't composure. It was that I was afraid if I looked at her face across that room, I would stand up and go to her, because she is my daughter, and she was 30 feet away, being told to sit down in a room full of strangers, and some part of me that will never stop being her mother nearly did it anyway. So I looked at the green cash box instead, sitting on the table in front of Fiona with a numbered exhibit sticker pressed on the lid, slightly crooked over the masking tape where Leonard had printed CCB in his block letters. The judge asked if I wished to be heard. I stood from where I was sitting and I said 5 things. I said, "I am not asking this court to take my daughter's business. I am asking that she pay what she and her husband signed." I said, "I paid for my husband's funeral in April, $1,200 out of my own account. Under the Succession Law Reform Act, funeral expenses are a priority claim, and I would like that money back." I said, "I am claiming the surviving spouse's preferential share from the net estate, and I am asking for a full accounting of the dental rent that was collected between April and November into the estate account, which by right of registered instrument LT 412208 should have come to me." And then the 5th thing, which I had not told Fiona I was going to say. I said, "None of this was hidden. My husband registered these instruments at the land registry in March of 2021. They have been sitting in a public database for 4.5 years. Anyone with $11 could have found them in 20 minutes. My daughter's husband is a real estate lawyer. Not one person in my family ever searched. The courtroom was quiet for a moment. The judge granted the preferential share petition. She ordered a full accounting of the estate, including all rent collected since the date of death. She ordered the funeral expense claim paid in priority. She made no ruling on the note itself. That was a matter between me and my daughter outside of probate, but she said on the record that the merger argument had no legal merit given the registration date. We came out into the hallway, stone floor, the kind that makes every footstep loud. Thomas held the door. My daughter walked past me without stopping. Her husband paused beside me for a moment. He is a real estate lawyer who had worked out of a building where the registered instruments were public record for years. He said nothing. He walked out. My daughter stopped at the end of the hall. She turned around. She said, "Why did Dad do it this way? Why didn't he just talk to us?" I told her the truth. I said, "Because if he had, I would have called you, and you would have sent one payment to keep things calm, and one payment accepted restarts the entire clock. 30 days all over again." He knew exactly what I would do. He didn't hide it from me. He protected me from my own habit of fixing things too quickly. She stood there for a long moment. Then she said, "Did you know, before he died, did you know any of this?" I said, "No." She said, "Then how could he do that to you?" I said, "He trusted me to handle it afterward. He trusted that more than he trusted a conversation. That was the only difference." I walked out to my car and sat in it for 15 minutes before I turned the key. Here is what happened in the months after, in order, because dates are more honest than feelings. November 28th. The dental rent arrears, $67,200 for 28 months, were transferred back to me from the estate account. The funeral reimbursement of $12,600 was paid December 4th. December 20th. My daughter and her husband cured the default on the note. They arranged financing through their bank and transferred the arrears, plus interest and costs, to Fiona's trust account. I reinstated the note. New terms, pre-authorized debit on the first of each month, no exceptions. One payment more than 15 days late, and the full outstanding balance accelerates. No telephone calls, no discussions. Her husband signed the amendment in Fiona's office on a Wednesday and asked for a copy for his file. I said, "Of course. That is how this works." January. The dental practice resumed paying the building lease to my daughter's company, the note being current. Spring. The estate was formally closed. The preferential share came to me. Between the allowances, the rent recovery, the funeral reimbursement, and the reinstated note payments, I had more stability than I had known in years. I bought a small house on Harriet Street, 2 bedrooms, a narrow back garden, a kitchen window that looks east over the rooftops in the morning. The deed says Cecily Drummond. Just that. Nothing in second position, nothing in smaller type. The green cash box sits on the bookshelf in the front room at eye level. I leave it unlocked now. Leonard's letter is still inside. So is the small brass key. On the strip of masking tape where he had printed CCB in block capitals, I wrote 2 words in my own handwriting underneath his. It's registered. I told Thomas about the Teranet system on a Sunday call in February. I walked him through it over the phone. You type the address, you pull the instrument history, you pick your date range. It took him 9 minutes to find his own name on a property he had co-purchased in Vancouver, a mortgage clause he had never noticed. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Mom, how did you know to look for all of this?" I said. "I didn't look for 34 years. That is the whole story. There is one piece of advice I have, and it is not complicated. I did not win because I was smarter than anyone in my family. My daughter's husband is a real estate lawyer, and he did not find what I found. I found it because I was the only one willing to spend one Tuesday morning in a building I already knew, searching a public database that has been there, accessible to anyone, for years. If your name is on a property anywhere in this country, go look it up. The registry is public. It costs less than lunch. If something is there that you did not know about, you will want to know. If something is missing that should be there, you will want to know that even more. Go read the paper with your name on it before someone else reads it for you. That is what an old woman in Perth, Ontario has to tell you tonight. One green cash box, $11, and a daughter who never checked.